Hello, I'm Mario Toneguzzi, co-editor-in-chief of Retail Insider. Joining me today is Bruce Winder, who is a retail analyst in Canada. Thanks for joining us again, Bruce.
Yeah, thanks for having me on the program, Mario.
Lots to talk about these days. We're not going to talk about Hudson Bay. It's been talked about quite a lot lately, but what we're going to talk about is something that is Canadian, and it is the Buy Canadian movement that we've seen growing out there in the country. Let's first of all talk about the why, Bruce. Why are you seeing this?
Yeah, I'm seeing really a couple of trends, and one of them is the Buy Canadian movement. And this is nothing new. It's something we've been talking about for a few weeks. But I think what you're seeing now is you're seeing sort of the efforts of a lot of planning over the last couple of weeks coming to fruition at retail. So you can see so many retailers who are really, touting the Canadian flag. Everything from Loblaw with the maple leafs on shelf. Amazon has a website, separate website set up just for Canadian items called Amazon Canada Showcase. Home Hardware, I know, is touting their Canadian heritage. Basically, anyone, Roots had a picture taken with the founders. So, I think everyone in Canada is really got behind this movement. And the why is really because our sovereignty is being challenged from south of the border from President Trump, right? Not just from the tariff war, but also from the potential annexing of Canada toward the US. So, I've never seen Canadians sort of unite behind something in my life like I have right now.
Hmm. Is this sustainable, or is this just a brief moment in time?
Yeah, it's a great question, and I'm not really sure. I mean, I think as long as the tariffs continue and as long as we feel a genuine fear for our sovereignty, this is going to continue. If the tariffs blow over and things start to go back to normal, I think, we might kind of tone it down a little bit, but it just shows you, Canadians have a deep sense of pride, and we don't always show it sometimes. We're not loud and boisterous, but it's there, and once it's awakened, it can be a force to be reckoned with.
So, what do retailers have to do to respond to this sentiment that's out there right now?
Well, what I think retailers are doing right now is they're offering value, and that was sort of the second part of my major observation is I'm starting to see a lot of value out there, and value's been out there for a while now. It hasn't been an easy economy, but what we're starting to see is I think a heightened level of value. I look at something like Loblaw this week. I went on their website. They have dollar days, and that's something that usually, you always think of times that are tough when that happens, economies that are tough. Amazon has their big spring sale running this week. Home Hardware is offering do not pay till 2026. I went on Rona. Rona has a whole bunch of value-based products. Canadian Tire has a lot of value-based messaging on essentials. So I can really just kind of feel everyone sort of dialing up the value. And I think that's no accident. I think they're doing that because they're responding to Canadians' needs. Canadians are nervous right now. They're watching their pocketbook. They're nervous about job loss because of the tariffs. They're nervous about inflation because of the counter tariffs. So I think retailers have done a good job of responding to really sort of meet the customer in terms of what the customer needs right now.
Now, typically, we see that I think, it'd be safe to say that many Canadian kind of items and products may be a little more expensive, right? On the typical side of things. So I just wondering how these two, I guess, trends that are happening by Canadian, yes, going to value, how they mesh. Uh,
Yeah, it's a great question. It's a great question because sometimes Canadian products are more expensive. But what I think we're seeing is I think we're seeing that retailers are looking around more and they're looking at sourcing products from Canada in different ways. Because even though Canadian products may be a bit more expensive, if you add on a 25% tariff from American products in this new normal, suddenly they're cheaper. So suddenly they're cheaper, right? So they may have been more expensive before the tariffs came in. With the countermeasures, they may suddenly be a bit of a bargain for consumers. But definitely it's a challenge, right? It's sort of done at an item by item basis. And it is challenging for retailers, particularly since the Canadian dollar is weak, and that's putting added pressure on landed costs of imported items as well.
Now, beyond just like the actual items and products that are still sold in stores, let's talk a little bit about stores themselves. Like, and I've heard people say, oh, I'm not going to be shopping, buying my coffee at Starbucks anymore, or I'm not going to be going to Costco, et cetera. Like, uh, now that's understandable. Like, you've got that sentiment, but, what impact does that have for all the people that are employed in Canada by these mega retailers, right? So, you start affecting them, in that way, don't you?
Yeah, I mean, that's a great point, and that's something we've been talking about when this first came out is that, you may boycott an American company, but you have Canadians working for that American company. So I think as Canadians, we have to be a little careful about that. One thing that I'm surprised hasn't got as much flack up here is that I know that Costco recently pulled off Canadian items from their shelf in the US because of the tariffs. So, I think Canadians are pretty forgiving. We're tough, but we're forgiving. We also realize, to your point, that you know what, we can't throw the baby out with the bathwater because a lot of American companies have subsidiaries up here, they have stores up here, they have factories up here. And if we boycott them 100%, then we're just hurting Canadians as well. So it's a fine line, it's a balancing act. I think a lot of Canadians are out there trying to support companies that employ Canadians,
Mm.
that have made an effort to employ Canadians, as well as sell Canadian-made product of Canada, etc.
Yeah, wonderful. Thanks so much, Bruce, for joining us today.
Yeah, thanks, Mario. Have a great day.
You too. That was Bruce Winder, who is a retail analyst in Canada. I'm Mario Toneguzzi, co-editor in chief of Retail Insider. Thanks for joining us today.